Hello friends, welcome back to the final video in our series on the Sino-Vietnamese War, book by Edward O. Dowd. Friends, I encourage you all to watch the video multiple times. Friends, every week I'll provide questions related to each video for you to answer. You can find the assessment series on this channel. Test yourself by watching the videos first and then attempting the questions in the assessment series, which will be posted every Sunday. Friends, over time you will grasp all the facts and understand the subjects thoroughly. Still, if you have any questions about the assessment series, leave them in the comments below the video. Best of luck, and please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button if you find this channel helpful. Friends, share among with your friends and do stay tuned. Thank you, and let's start with the today's topic, that is about the part 20. Friends, in this video, which encompasses the significance of China's military failure in the Third Indochina War, attempting them to the Maoist military policies and a lack of tactical adaptability. Deng Xiaoping recognition of these weaknesses prompted reform, emphasizing military education, signaling a shift toward a more professionalized and a capable People Liberation Army. Let's start with today's first topic. First, in the conclusion, is about the diplomatic tension. Friends, diplomatic tension, this defines that how China and Vietnam disagree about things that happened in the past. They argued about how they remember past events, especially wars, and who was right and wrong. And this causes problems between the two countries. One big issue is about where their borders should be, and both countries think that they should control certain areas, which lead to fights. And the way they tell stories about their past is closely linked to how they see themselves as nation. It's like if you and your friend remembers a fun day out differently, and it causes an argument. Sometimes countries have different ideas about history, which can make them upset with each other. And to solve this problem, China and Vietnam need to talk and understand each other better, just like friends need to talk to solve arguments. Next, about the obstacle to friendship. Friends, this paragraph discusses how, despite attempts to improve their relationship through trade, official visit, and discussion about borders, disagreement over historical portrayals continue to hinder the friendship between China and Vietnam. And this incident highlights how differing interpretation of history can affect the present day diplomatic ties. Essentially, even though both countries are trying to get along better by doing things like trading more and visiting each other's leaders, they are still having trouble because they can't agree on how to remember certain events from the past. This shows that how countries view history can really get in the way of them being good friends. It suggests that unless they find a way to understand and accept each other's historical perspective, their effort to build a stronger relationship might not be as successful as they hope. Next, about the Chinese president request. Friends, Chinese President Jiang Zemin request for revision of Vietnamese history textbooks during his official visit. Jiang advocates for a more positive depiction of China's involvement in the northern Vietnam in 1979, suggesting a softer portrayal of China's support for the Khmer Rouge regime and minimizing references to the historical Chinese invasion of Vietnam. And this request reveals China's desire to shape historical narratives in a manner that reflect favorably on its action and policies, particularly concerning its relation in Vietnam. And by seeking changes to the content of Vietnamese textbook, Jiang aims to influence how future generations perceive and interpret historical events, aligning them more closely with China perspective. And this demonstrates the importance that China places on controlling historical narratives as a means of advancing its diplomatic and ideological interest, even in the context of bilateral relations with neighboring countries like Vietnam. Moving next is about the complex historical narratives. Friends, the intricate nature of historical narratives and their interpretation across different nations, it points out a notable gap between the significant and intense conflict between China and Vietnam from 1978 to 1991 and the challenges in finding detailed account of the war in recent Chinese and Vietnamese historical records. This observation underscores the complexities involved in documenting and presenting historical events, particularly those involving interstate conflicts and diplomatic tensions. The fact that the comprehensive treatment of the Sino-Vietnamese hostilities are lacking in both Chinese and Vietnamese histories suggests a divergence in how these events are remembered and narrated by each country. Such discrepancies may arise due to factors like political sensitivities, ideological differences, and national narratives, which shape the portrayal of historical events to suit each nation's interest and perspective. Friends, overall, the passage highlights the nuanced and multifaceted nature of historical narratives and challenges in reconciling differing interpretations of past events across nations. Moving next is about the impact on the historical memory. Friends, the incident underscored the significant influence of historical narratives on both national memory and diplomatic relations. The request to revise historical portrayals, particularly by Chinese President Jiang Zemin, reflect a deliberate effort to shape a collective understanding of the past that serve present diplomatic goals. And by seeking to alter how certain events are depicted in Vietnamese history textbooks, China aims to create a narrative that portrays its action and policies in a more favorable light. And this highlights the interconnectedness of historical memory and contemporary diplomacy, demonstrating how states use historical narrative as a tool to advance their strategic interest and shape perception of themselves and others. Additionally, the incident emphasizes the importance of historical interpretation in shaping national identity and shaping international relations, illustrating how dispute over historical memory can impact diplomatic interactions and hinder effort to build mutual understanding and cooperation. Next, next we'll discuss about the rewriting of history. Friends, this video delve into the phenomena of rewriting history, focusing on diminishing acknowledgement of the Third Indochina War within the Chinese discourse. It points out a noticeable trend where references to the war are being reduced or altogether omitted in various mediums such as autobiographies, encyclopedias, and public statement. And this shift suggests a deliberate effort to align with China's changing global image and strategic objectives. Moreover, the passage highlights a significant gap in comprehensive accounts or memoirs from Chinese political leaders, military commanders, or diplomats regarding the war years. And this absence underscores the selective nature of historical narratives and the control exerted over the portrayal of past events. By downplaying or ignoring certain aspects of history, authorities can shape public perception and maintain a preferred narrative that serve present-day interest. Let's start. In this, the first point, we'll discuss about some diminishing references in the Chinese discourse. First is about neglect in the autobiography and encyclopedia. Friends, the passage highlights a decline in the recognition of Third Indochina War within Chinese discourse. Specifically, it notes a diminishing emphasis on this conflict in autobiographies, encyclopedias, and the public statement. And these platforms, which typically serve as repositories of historical information and narratives, are observed to either downplay or completely omit references to the war. And such neglect suggests a deliberate effort to minimize the significance of Third Indochina War in collective memory and public consciousness of the China. And this trend may reflect broader shift in the China geopolitical priorities, diplomatic strategies, or domestic narratives. And by downplaying or omitting mentions of the war in these prominent sources, Chinese authority may seek to shape public perception, reinforce specific historical narratives, and align with evolving national narratives and diplomatic objectives. Overall, the passage underscored the importance of considering not only what is included but also what is excluded in historical discourse, as it reflects intentional choices that shape collective memory and understanding. Next, about the potential reasons. Friends, the two potential reasons for the diminishing emphasis on the Third Indochina War within Chinese discourse. Firstly, it proposes that this trend may stem from a deliberate effort to align with the China's evolving global image and strategic positioning. In this view, downplaying or omitting references to the war could be a conscious decision aimed at presenting a more favorable narratives to the international community, potentially to enhance China's diplomatic relations or a project a more positive image on the global stage. And secondly, the passage suggests that the another possible reason for the diminishing emphasis on the war could be the belief that there is a little value in studying the conflict perceived as lost or inconclusive. And this perspective implies that some may view the Third Indochina War as a historical event from which little can be gleaned in terms of lessons or insight, particularly if it ended unfavorably or did not achieve clear objectives. Friends, consequently, the omission or downplaying of the war in autobiographies, encyclopedias, and the public statement could reflect a perception that it holds little relevance or educational value for contemporary audience. Next, lack of memoirs and detailed account. First is about the scarcity of memoirs. Friends, the scarcity of memoirs from Chinese political leader, military commanders, or diplomats that cover the year of the Third Indochina War. It notes that those who have written about the late 1970s and 1980s often offer limited details about their involvement in conflict. And this dearth of first hand account from key figures in Chinese leadership during the war period underscore the challenges of accessing comprehensive and detailed insight into China's role and decision making processes during that time. And the lack of memoirs may be attributed to various factors, including political sensitiveness, the secretive nature of military operation, or strategic consideration regarding the portrayal of China's action in the war. And it suggests a deliberate choice by individuals in positions of power to either withhold or provide only limited information about their experience and actions during this period. Overall, the scarcity of memoirs from Chinese leaders and officials regarding the Third Indochina War highlights a significant gap in our understanding of China's involvement in the conflict and underscore the complexities of accessing reliable historical accounts in context where transparency and openness may be lacking. Next, about the illustrative example. Friends, specific examples such as on account of diplomat Yun Shui and the autobiography of Wang Hai, the former commander of the PLA Air Force, illustrates the trend of neglecting details related to the 1979 campaign against Vietnam. Yun Shui diplomat memoirs, for instance, provide scant information about China's military action during the conflict, focusing instead on broader diplomatic maneuvers and negotiations. Similarly, Wang Hai autobiography, while touching upon his experience during the late 1970s and 1980s, notably glosses over his involvement in the 1979 campaign and the offer limited insight into the PLA Air Force role in the conflict. Friends, this example highlights a pattern where individuals with first hand knowledge or involvement in the Third Indochina War often sidestep or downplay discussion of their specific action or experience during this period. And this selective treatment of the war reflect a broader trend of neglecting or minimizing details related to the China military operation against Vietnam in autobiographical and historical accounts, contributing to the scarcity of comprehensive narratives and insight into this aspect of Chinese history. Next, changes in the encyclopedia entries. First is about the reduction in the information. Friends, a reduction in the information about the war in Chinese encyclopedia with newer volumes containing less content on the conflict. And this trend suggests a deliberate effort to exercise or diminish references of the Third Indochina War within the pages of the Chinese reference work. And the decreasing coverage of the conflict in the newer editions indicates a shift away from providing comprehensive and detailed information about the war in these authoritative sources. The decision to reduce the information about the war in Chinese encyclopedia could stem from various factors, including political sensitiveness, evolving historical narratives, or editorial choices influenced by changing perception of the war significance. And by limiting coverage of the conflict in encyclopedia, Chinese authority may seek to control the narrative surroundings the war and shape public perception of its historical significance. Friends, overall, the reduction in the information about the war in Chinese encyclopedia highlight a broader pattern of selective memory and historical representation, underscoring the complexities of accessing comprehensive and unbiased information about contentious historical events in the context where political considerations may influence the dissemination of knowledge. Next, about the direction of content change. Friends, a notable shift in the content of encyclopedia entries, particularly concerning the Sino-Vietnamese border campaign and references to Cambodia. It notes a decrease in the length of entries and changes in the content direction, suggesting a deliberate effort to downplay the significance of the border campaign and omit references to Cambodia in certain instances. Friends, the direction of content change underscore a broader trend of selective representation and narrative shaping within Chinese encyclopedias. And by reducing the length of the entries and altering the content, authorities may seek to control the narrative surrounding contentious historical events such as Sino-Vietnamese border campaign and China involvement in Cambodia. And this could reflect a strategic decision to minimize discussion of sensitive topics or to present a sanitized version of history that align with official narratives and ideological objectives. Moving next about the selective presentation of the facts, that is encyclopedia entry in the Vietnam invasion of Cambodia. Friends, the selective presentation of the facts in encyclopedia entries related to the Vietnam invasion of Cambodia, it notes that certain crucial aspects such as China's involvement, including support for the Khmer Rouge, threat against the Vietnam and the military operation along the border, are conspicuously absent from these entries. The selective portrayal suggests a deliberate effort to shape the narrative surrounding Vietnam invasion of Cambodia, potentially to downplay China's role or to present a version of events that align with certain ideological or potential objectives. And by omitting references to China's involvement and action, these encyclopedia entries may seek to influence public perception and understanding of the conflict in a manner that serve specific interest. Next, about the framing of events. Friends, the framing of events suggests an intentional effort to portray the major geopolitical event in region as a Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia. And while downplaying China's involvement, this framing appears to prioritize emphasizing Vietnamese action while minimizing or omitting references to the China role, such as its support for the Khmer Rouge regime and subsequent military threats against Vietnam. And by framing the narrative in this manner, certain actors may seek to shape public perception and understanding of the conflict in a way that align with specific ideological or political objectives. And this selective portrayal could serve to downplay China's role in regional affairs and project a narrative that portrays Vietnam as the primary aggressor, potentially influencing diplomatic relation and public discourse on the issues. Next, about the desire to forget and shift in the strategy. In this, the first is about the Chinese desire to forget. Friends, the Chinese desire to forget its involvement in support the Khmer Rouge regime from 1978 to 1991, and that this desire to forget likely stems from a recognition of the controversial and often brutal nature of the Khmer Rouge regime, as well as the failure of Chinese military effort to achieve its goal in raising the price of Hanoi occupation of Cambodia. Friends, China's support for the Khmer Rouge during this period was a significant aspect of its foreign policy in Southeast Asia, driven by geopolitical consideration and a desire to counter Vietnamese influence in the region. However, the Khmer Rouge atrocities, including genocide and human rights abuses, tarnished its image and led to international condemnation. Additionally, the acknowledgement of the Chinese military failure to achieve its objective in Cambodia suggests a shift in the strategy or priorities in the China's regional policy. And this recognition may reflect a pragmatic reassessment of the past actions and a willingness to move toward a more constructive approach in the regional affairs. Next, we'll discuss about some decline of the PLA in China. Friends, the decline of the People Liberation Army in China formed a once effective fighting force to its state of the ineffectiveness during the Third Indochina War. In this video, and the writer Edward O'Dowd emphasizes the significant impact of political ideologies and leadership changes on the PLA capabilities over the year. Let's start. First is about the tactical ineffectiveness in the Third Indochina War. Friends, during the 1979 border campaign and subsequent clashes, the People Liberation Army exhibited inadequate performance at the tactical level, rendering it ineffective as a national power instrument. And despite the individual bravery, hardiness, and determination of Chinese soldiers, the PLA struggled due to a combination of tactical limitations, organizational issues, and political constraints. One major factor contributing to the PLA tactical ineffectiveness was its commitment to the massed attack in conditions that require decentralized fire and move tactics. And this rigid adherence to the traditional military strategies, which prioritize large scale assault over more flexible and decentralized approaches, proved ill suited to the terrain and operational realities of the Third Indochina War. Furthermore, the organizational issues within the PLA, such as communication breakdown and coordination challenges between units, exacerbated its tactical shortcomings. Political constraints, including interference from the higher ranking official or ideological consideration, may also hinder the PLA ability to adapt and respond effectively to the changing battlefield conditions. Next, about the transformation under Maoist ideology. Friends, the decline of the People Liberation Army from its historically successful period, such as during China Revolution, the Korean War, and the Indian Wars. It attributes this decline to the Mao Zedong ideological influence, along with the Lin Bao emphasis on the political work, which author terms the Maoist detour. Friends, during this period, professionalism and the modern equipments were de-emphasized in favor of the stronger political and ideological alignment with the party's goal. The PLA focus shifted toward political work with an emphasis on fostering loyalty to the Communist Party and promoting ideological conformity among its ranks. Friends, it identifies several key elements of the PLA identity during this period, including the political work system, egalitarian policies, and the abandonment of the military ranks and specializations. And these changes reflected Maoist ideals of class struggle and revolutionary fervor, prioritizing political loyalty and ideological purity over military professionalism and efficiency. Next, effect of the Maoist detour. Friends, the effect of the Maoist detour on the People Liberation Army was profound and multifaceted. Firstly, during the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution that took place in 1965 to 1975, the PLA effectiveness significantly declined. Its military skills and attitudes eroded as the focus shifted primarily toward political work, ideological conformity, and maintaining internal stability. And the emphasis on political work, patrol duties, and political services blurred the distinction between the PLA and the police force. And this shift impacted the PLA military effectiveness as resources and attentions were diverted away from training and modernization effort toward maintaining political control and ideological purity within the ranks. Furthermore, Mao Zedong's deep-seated distrust of the PLA created a climate of suspicion and fear within the military leadership. And this lack of trust and incentive for reform stifled innovations and hindered effort to modernize and improve the PLA capability. And as a result, the skill and competencies necessary for military effectiveness were neglected, further contributing to the PLA decline as a modern fighting force. Next, we'll discuss about some post-Mao era and recognition of ineffectiveness. Friends, the persistence of the Maoist detour in the People Liberation Army, even after Mao Zedong's death in 1976, with a continued belief in the PLA combat effectiveness. And despite mounting evidence of the contrary, such as PLA inability to achieve strategic objective in the Third Indochina War, the legacy of Maoist ideology endured. It was not until Deng Xiaoping realization of the PLA incapability to achieve its strategic objectives in the Third Indochina War that marked the end of Maoist detour in mid 1980s. Deng's acknowledgement of the PLA ineffectiveness served as a wake-up call, prompting a reassessment of military priorities and strategies. According to the author, friends, it was only after this acknowledgement that the real military modernization began in the earnest. And this recognition of the PLA shortcomings paved the way for reforms aimed at improving the PLA combat capabilities, modernizing its equipment, and enhancing its readiness for future conflict. Next, friends, next we'll discuss about some conclusion, that is the last part. First point in this is about the PLA ineffectiveness in the Third Indochina War. Friends, the PLA ineffectiveness in the Third Indochina War is attributed to the Maoist military policies. According to the passage written by the Edward O'Dowd, one key aspect of this ineffectuality was the reliance on masked daylight, which was utilized due to a lack of training in a small unit tactics. Friends, instead of employing more flexible and decentralized approach to combat, the PLA adhered to the outdated strategies that prioritize large-scale assaults. And additionally, the dominance of the political work system within the PLA absorbed resources and attention away from the military training and readiness. And this emphasis on the political indoctrination and ideological conformity within the ranks diverted resources that could have been allocated toward improving combat skills and modernizing equipments. Next, about the weaknesses in the political work system. Friends, the weaknesses in the political work system within the PLA during the Third Indochina War are evident in declining relationship between the cadres, that is military leaders or the political officers, and conscript, that is enlisted soldiers. And this decline suggests a breakdown in the communication and trust between leadership and the rank and the file soldiers, which could undermine morale and cohesion within the PLA. Furthermore, the passage suggests that there were failed attempts to gain critical support from the Vietnamese people. And this failure indicates that the political work system within the PLA may have been ineffective in winning over heart and minds among the local population. And without the support of the local populace, effort to achieve strategic objectives in the conflict may have been hampered, further highlighting the shortcomings of the political work system in the context of military operations. Next about counterproductive consequences of the Chinese invasion. Friends, the Chinese invasion of Vietnam had several counterproductive consequences for China's strategic interest in the region. Firstly, the invasion taught Vietnam that China was weak, as the PLA performance during the conflict was not as formidable as expected. And this perception of Chinese weaknesses may have emboldened Vietnam and reinforced its resolve to resist China's influence in the region. Instead of capitulating to Chinese pressure, Vietnam continued its war against Cambodian resistance group, further entrenching itself in conflict and solidifying its position as a regional power. And this persistence demonstrated Vietnam's determination to defend its interest and resist external aggression despite China military intervention. And moreover, Vietnam pursued guerrilla forces into Thailand, a close ally of China. And this action not only undermined China regional alliance but also highlight the unintended consequences by Chinese military intervention in Vietnam. Friends, by provoking Vietnam to extend its military operation beyond its border, China inadvertently destabilizes the region and weakened its own position. Moving next about some societal changes in China. Friends, the last 3 decades of the 20th century in the China were marked by the significant societal changes characterized by a transition from Maoist policies to Deng Xiaoping leadership. And friends, this period saw a departure from a rigid ideological orthodoxy and centralized control of Mao Zedong era toward a more pragmatic and market-oriented reform under Deng Xiaoping. Friends, Deng Xiaoping leadership ushered in a series of economic reforms and opening up policies that aim to modernize China's economy and integrate it into the global economy. And these reforms included initiatives such as four modernization and establishment of special economic zone which encouraged foreign investment and trade. And in addition to the economic changes, there were also shifts in the social and the cultural norms during this period. Friends, Deng's emphasis on socialism with Chinese characteristics allowed for the greater experimentation and diversity in societal practices, leading to increased personal freedom and opportunities for social mobility. Next, about the recognition of PLA critical weakening. Friends, Deng Xiaoping emphasized the importance of military education and training as a part of their effort to modernize and strengthen the People Liberation Army. Under Deng leadership, there was a recognition that the PLA had been critically weakened by Maoist military policies which prioritize political indoctrination and ideological purity over combat readiness and effectiveness. Friends, Deng emphasized on military education and training signaled a shift toward a more professional and modern military forces. He understood the importance of investing in the skill and capability of the PLA to ensure its effectiveness in defending China's national interest and security. Friends, by acknowledging the weaknesses stemming from Maoist military policies, Deng demonstrated a willingness to confront the challenges facing the PLA and implement reforms aimed at revitalizing the military. And this recognition laid the groundwork for reforms aimed at improving the PLA combat capabilities, modernizing its equipment, and enhancing its readiness for the future conflict. Moving next is about importance of revisiting military failure. Friends, the call for scholars to reconsider the significance of China military failure in the Third Indochina War underscored the importance of understanding and learning from the past mistakes. By revisiting these failures, scholars can gain valuable insight into the factors that contributed to the China ineffectiveness in the conflict and identify lessons that could be applied to the future military planning and operations. Friends, placing these failures with the context of recent military history allow for the more comprehensive analysis of China's military capability and strategic postures. It provides an opportunity to assess the impact of historical events on contemporary military doctrine, training, and readiness. Furthermore, a studying military failure can help to foster a culture of accountability and continuous improvement within the armed forces. And by openly acknowledging and learning from mistakes, military leaders can take proactive steps to address weaknesses and enhance overall effectiveness. Friends, here we come to the end of this whole series of Edward O'Dowd. Please do like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more updates. Thank you.